So my dad would do these things like, I'm backtracking for a second here, but he did this thing where he made platinum record plaques with my name on it. And he would say something like, this could be your record label's next platinum album. And so,
genius. That's genius.
He opened for Cheap Trick and Gary Moore and Iron Maiden. So I saw this and recognized this. And I said, I have two choices. I can just change my style and do something that's not me and just pretend. Or I said, music is cyclical and there will be a place for my voice again.
Welcome to In Search of Excellence, where we meet entrepreneurs, CEOs, athletes, motivational speakers, and trailblazers of excellence with incredible stories from all walks of life. My name is Randall Kaplan. I'm a serial entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and the host of In Search of Excellence, which I started to motivate and inspire us to achieve excellence in our lives. My guest today is Kelly Hansen, the lead singer of the legendary rock band Foreigner, which has had 5 platinum records and has sold more than 80 million records. Kelly, welcome to In Search of Excellence. Thanks for being here today.
Nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
I start my podcast with our family because from the moment we're born, our family helps shape our personalities, our values, and the preparation for our future. You were born in Hawthorne, California, and you grew up in Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach, in the area of Los Angeles. Can you tell us about your parents growing up and Hermosa Beach? Can you tell us about your parents growing up and Ramsey Lewis and listening to pop music on your mom's GTO as you two were riding in her car?
Right. Back in the day, when your parents would go out for a cocktail party or to visit with friends, you would often see them carrying albums under their arm of their personal choice in music. And I remember my parents going out and doing that. And Ramsey Lewis Live at the Bohemian Caverns was one of those albums. And I grew to really like that album. There's a great bass solo, stand-up bass solo in there, and in with the in crowd, and that was really great. But I do have a vivid picture of them walking out of the house with albums under their arm, because they would go over and everyone would put their own records on, and while they're having conversation or cocktails, that would be the music in the background, as opposed to putting on the FM radio or whatever. It was just, that was your custom playlist, was your albums under your arm. And my mom, with the GTO, convertible GTO, awesome car. I don't think she even knew what she had when she had it. And, but she was—
My mom had one, by the way.
Oh, really?
Well.
And you know what? My dad's name is Randall. I forgot to tell you that. That's pretty cool. Not many people named Randall.
There are not.
Right. And, she always had the commercial pop radio station on in the car, always. So whenever we were going around doing errands or whatever, that was always in my ear all the time.
And how did the rock station or the pop station influence you? Which did you like more, the jazz, Ramsey Lewis, or did you like the pop, whatever was popular at the time? Where was your head at that time?
It's a hybrid, but now that I'm a lead vocalist, I realized that at the time I associated singing with being a singer in front and a band in back. And they weren't necessarily a group together. It was like a single artist backed by a band or an orchestra or whatever like that. And it wasn't until much later that I realized, when I, heard Led Zeppelin and the Stones, I was like, oh, this is a group. It's not Frank Sinatra out front or Dinah Washington, out front, and this collection of faceless people behind them. So it took me a while to understand that concept. And I think that's different for a singer than it is for a musician.
You were in the choir at school. Is that where your interest in singing first developed? And then when you talk about Zeppelin and the Stones, we're talking about Robert Plant and Mick. Were they your idols and who you wanted to be?
Well, as far as the school choir goes, it was part of the normal curriculum to take a choir class. And one of the reasons that you can talk about later on why we do our choir participation stuff is connected to that. So it wasn't really something I was seeking out. It was just part of one of the classes that I had to take was choir. And I still remember to this day the Indian rain dance that we called it back then. Now would be the indigenous or Native American rain dance song that people would sing to try to make it rain for the crops. And I have no idea whether it's real or not, but that's what they told us it was. And I think for me, performance-wise, early on, there was James Brown, there was Rod Stewart, there was Mick Jagger, Robert Plant was later on in my musical understanding because I wasn't into heavy groups because I was always listening to pop commercial radio. So, but I think performance-wise, it was around that kind of performer that I spoke of that really kind of said to myself, "Oh, that's how you entertain an audience."
Billy Joel had a music teacher when he was 14 years old that said, "This is what you should do in life," and it inspired him and really prompted him to go out and be a musician and gave him the confidence. When you were in your choir class, was it like it is today where the teachers pick you out because you have the best voice and you sing at the graduations and the events and the recitals? Or were you just a regular member of the choir and at that point were nothing quote unquote special compared to the rest of your classmates?
I think I had a short solo section in one of the songs. I can't quite recall. I don't think that I was exceptional in any way at the time. I had a high voice, so I remember being in the kind of tenor or soprano part of the choir. I do remember that.
You discovered that you could sing almost by accident. Can you tell us how you were at the beach one day with some family friends and one of the sons had a guitar with him and was a guitarist, and what happened next?
We had two families that were friends, and both families had children, and one was an older guy, and he carried his guitar everywhere with him. So we were at the beach one day, and of course he had his guitar with him, and we were just sitting there, and he said, "Well, why don't we sing a couple songs?" So we sang a couple things, and he invited me to sing with his band, and then a couple months later, I was the lead singer of the band, and although there was a lot of growing pains, like I didn't know how to use my voice, and every show my voice was done after that. It was like, so I had to learn how to use my voice. I had to take some singing lessons, and but at that time it was late in my high school years, and I was starting to have like a mental panic attack about what am I going to do for my future. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I wasn't great academically. I felt that I was smart. And I had a job in a Mexican restaurant and that kind of thing, but that's obviously not what I was thinking of as far as a career to be a dishwasher. So, although there's nothing wrong with that. But when I started singing and started getting the response from the fans, and I started getting some money, getting paid to perform, I kind of said, well, this is something I seem to have at least some affinity for. I enjoy doing it. I seem to have the ability to do it. So I fell into it accidentally, really. It wasn't like this passionate pursuit that got me into singing or into the music business.
I hope you're enjoying this video so far, but before we jump back in, I want to know if you've ever thought about what you need to do to reach the next level of success in your life. Over the last 25 years, I've been an advisor to more than 50 companies. I've invested nearly 100, including Google, Lyft, and Seagate, and I also co-founded a company that today is worth more than $15 billion. I've been incredibly blessed in my journey, and at this stage in my life, I want to give back. I want to share the lessons I've learned so you can reach incredible success way faster than I did. In my own journey, I've learned that having the right mentor is a massive advantage to achieving our goals. I'm hugely passionate about mentoring others, and I'm looking for a few hungry entrepreneurs who are excited to take action on their journey to incredible future success. So if that's you, I've got an opportunity. In the description of this video, there's a link where you can apply to work with me. All you need to do is answer a few simple questions, and if you're a good fit, my team will reach out so we can build a game plan together. All right, now let's get back to the video. So how old were you when you actually formed that band? What was it called, and what was your first gig like? You hear so many stories about these musicians starting out. We talked about Led Zeppelin. All these bands play at the Troubadour. They seem to all have to go through there. But even way before then in high school, what kind of gigs were you getting? What was the first one, and when did you start getting paid? Right. What was the feeling where you said, oh my God, I actually got paid for singing tonight? Yeah, I don't remember that feeling, but the first gig I played was at they called it was a co-rec center, like a recreation center that was a park that was basically a building in a park that could be used for different public functions. And so the park services would have like a teen dance night, and they would hire a band and we would do cover songs. And that was and it was playing to like 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds or whatever. And I was about 17, I think. And so we played junior highs, high schools, high school dances. I played my own high school and at Miracosta High School in Manhattan Beach. And we came back to the dressing room after the show, and all of our stuff had been stolen by my own schoolmates. That doesn't give you any kind of weirdness in your head, does it? No, but we eventually ended up playing all over Southern California. We played a military base. I think it was in Yuma, Arizona. Yuma. And this is still while you're in high school. We're still in high school phase right now. I took the GED to get out of high school early because I was gigging. So I took the tests, and it's a pass or fail kind of thing. It takes 3 or 4 hours, and so I passed apparently. And because we were doing gigs, and you'd be up till 2 or 3 at night, either finishing the gig or traveling home from a gig that's far away. But I remember I was talking about this gig we had, this military base, and we get there and we start setting up, and it's like at a non-commissioned officers party. People are having dinner. And I'm looking around, everybody's in these dress uniforms and with their wives in gowns. And I had a funny feeling about that because I knew what kind of music we did. Come to find out that we were a top 40 band, but they thought we were a band that did songs from the 40s. So we did Roll Out the Barrel a lot that night. You mentioned you didn't graduate from high school. You got a GED. So many musicians, their passion starts when they're in their teen years, their high school years, and they have a decision to make. Do I go to college or don't I go to college? And so few musicians actually make it professionally where they can earn a living. Talent often doesn't have a single thing to do with it. There's a lot of other things, as you know, and we can go into that later in the show today. But what's your advice to those listening today who are thinking to themselves, hey, I'm in high school. Do I really need to go to college? And what would you be telling your best friends' kids, or if you decide to have kids of your own, what's your advice to them? Should they go to college, or should they pursue their dreams and go try to be a musician and make a living at it? Well, I would prefer to relate my story, which was college was probably not an option for me. We didn't have that kind of money. And I had no idea what I wanted to pursue. And I happened to fall into something that started working for me. But I do know that if you choose to pursue music as a career, you better really, really want it, because you're going to sacrifice immensely in many areas of your life. And if you're fortunate, you won't be a huge pop or rock star when you're too young, because it's very difficult at a super young age to be able to handle the weight of fame and or money. Bless you. And thank you. And so I
I mean, I had a modicum of success when I joined my band Hurricane, but before that, there was a lot of struggle, and I learned some really big lessons with Hurricane, and I now say to myself, I think I was really fortunate that the band wasn't bigger than it was at the time, because I'm not sure how I would have developed as a person with that environment around me. So, but if you really want to do it, be prepared to sacrifice. And that means you don't get to have all the nicest clothes and shoes and jewelry and all those things that young people seem to want. You're going to have to work your ass off, and you're going to have to pay your dues. And that's how my era did it. There are some obviously newer ways to do things that include some shortcuts or not having to work as hard. There are some TV shows that you can become a star overnight, on a contest show, but the odds are still slim. I think it's harder to start a band now than it was back in the day. I think it's harder to get attention when there is a glut of music and artists out there who some of them would never have gotten a chance to even have a band back in the day, because the only bands that really got record deals were bands that were really good. And now anyone can make a record in their bedroom, and doesn't mean they should. So think about those things. And I think it's really good to follow your passions and understand what you want and know what you want, because that's what it's going to take. And I also had parents who were very supportive of me. They said, whatever you want to do, we're behind you 100%. And that was very helpful to me, because I didn't have someone trying to talk me out of it and get a regular job and all that kind of stuff.
Could you have been successful if your parents had said, I really don't want you to do this, go get a regular job, a 9-to-5 job, or go be a doctor or lawyer?
It's hard. It's hard for me to answer a hypothetical, but I can't help but think if I didn't have their support, that my beginning would be the same as it was.
There's something in all of us about our parents believing in us. And I've said this on a bunch of my previous shows. I think someone once told me the 4 most powerful words in the human language are, I believe in you. And there's nothing like your parents saying that to you and giving you the confidence to go out and do and be whatever you want to be.
I think that that's partially true. I think sometimes it takes a while for that phrase to circulate around your mind and your experience. And then sometime down the road, you understand how important that was for you. Because I think a lot of times what is said to you when you know everything and you're know more than everyone, and you really don't understand anything that an adult says, or some things go in one ear and out the other. For me, it took a little while for me to really grasp how much that meant.
We're going to come back to the sex, drugs, and rock and roll in a little bit, but walk us through the evolution of that's what everyone loves to hear about, right? What was it really like? But we're going to get there.
Right.
What was the evolution for you? We'll go up through Hurricane and tell us kind of what you did next. So you're in this band from high school, and then there's always something that changes, and it's very rare. You got Van Halen, right? They stay together forever. They finally had to change later on in life. With David Lee Roth, we'll talk about Foreigner as well, and the change and bringing you in. But what's the evolution here in terms of you're in this high school band, you're touring, you're at Air Force bases, people confuse what you're doing. But what happened next? How did you grow?
I left that band, and then for a while, I had my own bands. I had the Kelly Hansen band. I had a band called The Last Tango, and played around LA, because LA was famous for all of the clubs where original bands, unsigned bands could play. And my father was my manager, and we had a fan club where, oh man, I think back to how archaic this was. We had a fan club where we had people could sign up on a 3x5 card, and they'd give us their name, their address, and their telephone number. And then we compiled them on a list in handwriting or on the typewriter. And then whenever we had a show, we'd have to make the calls or send out a little flyer. So I used to stuff envelopes with flyers to send out to our fan club to say, we're going to be playing here or there. And some of those great people still go to shows that I perform at today. And that was 45 years ago. So that's wild. And then I occasionally did sessions, started doing some session things. And if my memory doesn't fail me, I started playing in another cover band, a couple of them. And this is where I started to make regular money. We were a popular cover band called the Riz Kids. And we played all around Southern California, and we would play 5 to 6 nights a week, and we would play 5 hours a night. So that's 45 minutes with a 15-minute break every hour. And my voice would be trash at the end of the week, for obvious reasons. And but that's where I was honing my skills as a performer and trying to motivate people and to have a good time and have fun. And because that translated to management of the club or the owner saying, hey, these guys really get people up and going. And then they're going to have you back and pay you more the next time. So that was really my focus, was really try to find the signals from the audience or the environment or whatever it is to get people involved in the show and get going. That turned into a kind of a bag of tricks of sorts of things that I have at my disposal to motivate an audience. And that was, I wouldn't say many, but several years of me doing that. And I would sing everything from Summertime, from Porgy and Bess to Van Halen. And so there was a lot of learning going on at the time. And that went all the way up into the hurricane years.
So when you went through these bands and you started your own band, did you say, hey, I'm Kelly, I've got a good voice, and look for people through word of mouth? Hey, are you a guitarist? We need a drummer. And then as you started playing in this cover band, did they find you? And how did it work?
Well, I was friends with a guy named Ross Bolton, who was a great guitarist who's sadly passed. And he owned the store at a place called the Guitar Institute of Technology, called GIT at the time. There are now been numerous iterations of that, but at the time, it was where a lot of guitar players would go. It was a school in Hollywood where guitarists and bass players and drummers would go to learn music. And with that, they would be playing with each other in different setups. There was a recording studio there, and it kind of got you familiar with the musical entertainment ground. And so he played with me for a while, and I met other musicians through GIT and through various other sources, but no one was really coming to me. In fact, it was very difficult for me to have my own band because I just had to hire everybody to play. And when you're not making a lot of money, that's difficult to do because it wasn't a band. It was really me hiring a band. So you got to pay everybody. And that became one of the huge hurdles in doing that for me.
So walk us through Hurricane, which before Foreigner was your big band, and you had a lot of success, and you had things crash very, very quickly. And I'd love to talk about the impetus of the band, the rise of the band, and then you 2/3 of a way through your tour and getting a call from your publicist with respect to 2 different album covers, and then things just crashing immediately.
Yeah. I was playing in a cover band, and there was a music magazine. Oh, I forget what it was called in LA. I think maybe it was Music Connection magazine, and which I later, many years later, was on the cover of. But I was looking through Music Connection magazine because that's where a musician or singer would look for ads for musicians or singers, bands looking for singers or people looking for guitar players. And there was all sorts of associated musical advertisements for guitars and drums, and there were articles about the music business. And so it was, if you were a musician starting out, that was what you would read. And I saw an ad for these guys looking for a singer to make a band. And the drummer was the one doing the ad. So I responded to the ad, and I remember I was living in a bungalow apartment in Burbank, a 1-bedroom bungalow. And I remember this drummer coming to my apartment, and we sat down and talked about, you know, what they were doing, what I was doing, and could we do something together. He ended up having Tony Cavazzo and Robert Sarzo, who were brothers of the two guitar player and a bass player of Quiet Riot. And so Tony and Robert came down to my Top 40 gig, where I'm sure I was wearing some sort of tights with leg warmers and leather capezios and, and a cutoff shirt. Who knows? So they came to the show and they liked what they saw. So we got together and we started out writing songs in an office that was closed at night, obviously, because it was an office. So during the day, regular office, things were going on, but Robert knew either the office manager or someone who owned the company or whatever it was, and they let us use one of the empty rooms at night to write songs. And we started moving forward with material, and then we somehow got a manager. I forget how that happened, but we ended up getting different rehearsal rooms, and we had some investor money here and there, people who kind of backed us a little bit, so we could have what they call a lockout. That's where we had basically, you had this rehearsal room from when the doors open in the morning to when the doors closed at night. You could go in there any day or however many days a week you wanted to and rehearse. And so we rehearsed in a lockout across the parking lot from Sound City, which if you've seen Dave Grohl's documentary, you know about it. And Goodnight LA, which was right next to Sound City. And so we were rehearsing there, and we had to get rid of the original drummer. He wasn't working with us musically. So the manager had been working as a tour manager, I think it was, for Lita Ford. And she had this drummer that he thought might be a good fit for us. So we decided to meet with this drummer. And so he comes to Sound City, and he had a black 68 El Camino with a big block 396. He had black drums, he had black clothes, and he had black hair. And his name was Jay Shellen. And so that's when this really became Hurricane, because we finally came together as a unit that worked musically together. And then we did some demos with a producer called Kevin Beamish, who did a lot of stuff with REO Speedwagon. And we had a contract that he was going to do some demos with us, and we had to agree on the mixes in order for him to get paid. And we didn't like the mixes. He literally said to me one day, "No one listens to the drums anyway," because I was making a comment if I didn't like a certain drum sound. So we left the contract, but we still had the tracks. So we took the tracks around and mixed them ourselves. And we took them around to all of the record labels. My previous experience with record labels was my father trying to concoct ingenious ways of getting record company A&R men's attention. And as the A&R means artist and repertoire. They had these guys who did or didn't have legitimate knowledge of songs or music, but they had the job at the company to go out and find bands and talent and songs. So my dad would do these things like, I'm backtracking for a second here, but he did this thing where he made platinum record plaques with my name on it and the song or whatever. And he would say something like, "This could be your record label's next platinum album." And so
Genius. That's genius.
So he would send those out with the demo song, the demo tape. But that was years before, and it never really ended up in anything. But it did end up getting me connected with a very, very good attorney. And so over the years, I was very, very judicious in my asking for help from this attorney, and he never charged me, but he would always give me good advice and connected me with some people too. So there was a record label called Green World Records, and the wife of the president was at one of our shows and convinced her husband to come see the band. And we ended up signing a P&D deal, which was production and distribution. So it's not like we had a full record deal, but they would pay for the production of an album, and they would distribute it through their pipeline. And then what we did was I think we remixed and repackaged the EP, and they distributed it for us. And then we went on tour, and I think we went on tour with Stryper, and on that EP. Then we came back into the studio to make our first record, which was what my first record with them called. Maybe I don't know. It wasn't called. Give me a second. Geez, that's so stupid. Wow, I'm having total senior moment right now. Well, anyway, we made our first record, and we went out on the road, and we started opening for other bands that were really great. We opened for Cheap Trick and Gary Moore and Iron Maiden. And our second record had our biggest single on it, which was Take What You Want. And then it came time to make our third record, which was Slave to the Thrill, with Michael James Jackson producing. And that took a year of our lives. We were doing shows. We had a lockout where we would go and we would write. And there had a lounge, which was a separate room. So what would happen is that we'd go into the big room where the band was set up, and everyone would bring in their little pieces of ideas and chunks of ideas, and we'd work on them, and we'd write them, and we'd extend them and grow them into song ideas. And we did that for a year, and right in the middle of that, we had to let our original guitar player go. So then we got Doug Aldrich in the band, and we continued working on the record and made the record. And the label was telling us, oh, you guys are our priority. We're really going to make you guys, the thing this year. And this is really going to happen for us, and blah, blah, blah. So we're out on the road. And for the first time ever, we have a junky, but real tour bus, which we're paying for out of advanced money from the label. So the label has given us money to tour on, but if the record starts to make any money, they get paid back before we make any money. So we're living off advance money, and we also had to do a publishing advance. So we got advancements on our publishing too. So we're doing everything we can to have enough muscle to get out there on the road and play. And so that's what we're doing. And then, as you read, one day I get a copy of a press release which was now Enigma Records, because Green World had folded into Enigma. There was a buy-in of like $20 million or whatever. And the two brothers that started the original label, who were the genius minds behind the success of that Green World label, one kind of parachuted his way out of that and was no longer the creative director of the label. And the other one, who was really in charge of the business end of things, he was out too. So they hired just people to come in and start running the label, which was not really great. They ran it into the ground. I heard all kinds of stories of alleged misappropriations and other things that were not necessarily kosher. So we're on the road, and we had come to the label before we released the album. We said, we have this famous album designer, and he's done stuff for Rush and really great. And we have this idea for this cover, which was called, for the album that was called Slave to the Thrill. Now, remember, it was a different time. And the concept was this woman on this machine that was basically going to provide her with sexual gratification. And it was very, who's the movie director that I'm thinking of? That's right. It's a very mechanical, dark kind of look to it. So the label says, "Oh my God, we love that idea. That's amazing." You know? And so at the time they paid $14,000 for this album cover, which at the time was a lot for a band of our stature. And, so we did the photo shoot, which was basically a model of this machine that was photographed as a model. Then for the second half of the photo shoot, they take a photograph or a negative or whatever of that machine, and they had a device in which they could put it over the lens for a new photo shoot. And they set up boxes and crates and had a model up on these boxes and crates to make it look as though she was on this machine in this reclining position. And so we did the photo shoot, and it's an amazing looking cover. And then I get this press release from the label while we're on the road promoting that record, that the label was now going to release 2 versions of our album, one with the girl and one without the girl. And they didn't ask us or anything, but what they were afraid of is that the big box stores wouldn't order the album because they were afraid that it looked too sexual. And I was like, well, that's good. That's controversy we want. You know, that'll bring us notice. And because at the time we were trying to find, how can we find ways to get attention about this band? And I remember we'd be on the road and we'd be sitting around the pool on a day off, and we'd go, well, maybe one of us should get arrested for doing something. You know, we'd come up with these ideas of how we can get the band noticed. So I'm like, yeah, that's what we want. That's controversy. That'll make news articles. That'll bring attention to the record. People will buy it because people think it's bad or nasty, and you know, kids love that. So that'd be great. Labels, well, you know, we're scared that they're not going to order the records, so we're going to offer them a version without the woman on it. So then essentially what you have is an album cover with a machine on it. You don't know what's happening. It says nothing. It's just this, they don't even know what it is. So I was heavily miffed at that, but there was nothing I could do. And then further along down the road, we're playing these shows on the road, opening with all these bands in order to sell records. Then one day I talked to the publicist at that label, and she goes, they fired 2/3 of the staff today. 2/3 of the staff. And I said to myself, why are we even out here on the road? We're spending money every day, and there's not going to be any records in the stores. In fact, we had experienced that we were going to in stores and they didn't have our record. So people coming to the store couldn't buy our record when we were in the store signing stuff. So we had to cancel the rest of the tour, and for 6 months, we didn't know whether we were still on the label or not. We would get no response from the label with our inquiries. So we had to eventually send them a letter that says, if you don't respond to this letter within X and X time frame, we are going to assume that we are no longer with the label. And now we're not making any money. We're out of our advance money, and we're starting to have to like sell equipment and stuff to pay rent and things like that. So, you know, after a year of our lives, that's what happened. And it was kind of soul crushing. And it made me, it soured me for a long time about my involvement in the music business.
Let's talk about being soured and how we motivate ourselves. And we'll talk about Foreigner in just a minute, but there was a period where you were not in a band and you were doing different things. So tell us what you were doing and what motivated you to stay in the music business at that point. And what were you thinking? Where was your head in terms of your future? Right.
Well, concurrent with the label going under and us not having a record deal, there was a new style of music that was coming in the early 90s that was more kind of earthy and I'm not going to just nail it down as grunge, but there was a paradigm shift in popular music, and metal was no longer the favored thing. And a high, clean tenor rock voice was not the thing. And so I saw this and recognized this. And I said, I have two choices. I can just change my style and do something that's not me and just pretend. Or I said, music is cyclical and there will be a place for my voice again. I just have to ride this out. So what I decided to do was tackle the other aspects of the recording business that I loved, or the music business that I loved, the recording studio. So it was at the very beginning of home studio technology. And I had been in the studio every day during the making of our albums, and I observed and I learned and I watched because it fascinated me. So I kind of had some chops to start in that realm. So I started doing engineering, producing, and artist development. And I worked with one producer where he would record all the music and I would record all the singing of whatever the singer was. And I would sing backgrounds, and then I would turn around and I'd give him all the vocals back, and he'd lay them into his mix. And so that was our kind of team setup. So that was a great learning experience, having to produce vocals. I mean, solely producing vocals. And you learn a huge amount about what's important sonically and how you do stuff. And it's a myriad of things. So I did that for a long time. But then as technology grew, more and more people were able to not have to go to a multi-million-dollar studio to make a record. People could do it in their house or in the garage. And when that happens, people who want to break into that start offering their services for less money to the people that you've already been doing work for. They go, oh, really? That's what he wants? I'll do it for this. So now the amount of money that starts to being offered for album production starts to slowly sink down as technology advances and everyone can get gear in their house. So it was becoming an issue of diminishing returns, that you would work harder. There were more demands on you, but you were making less and less money. And that became very problematic for me. It was starting to get really hard around the end of the 90s. And finally, one day I said to myself, you know what? Maybe I need to go back what I do best, and that's being a lead singer. So I had a discussion with myself. I said, okay, you're going to start saying yes until you can't say yes anymore. You're not going to turn anything down that you have the ability or the time to do. And everything will be an offshoot of a tree that's growing all in the same direction. That's how I pictured it in my mind. So I started researching and looking for things. And one of the main reasons I did this, because all my life, all my career, gigs just happened to fall in my lap. And I didn't have to even look for them. But now, at the end of the 90s, I started hearing about, well, there was this gig and I didn't even get a phone call for it. Like, I would have been perfect for that. And no one even thought of me. And believe me, it took me years after singing in Hurricane for anyone to allow me to sing anything other than metal. They thought they pigeonholed me as a metal singer, and that's all I was. So it took me years to come out of that. And I started getting out of it by doing backgrounds for other type of music. I would do an R&B background or a pop background vocal or whatever. And it started to slowly work its way into me being allowed to sing again and knowing that I'm not just a metal singer. So I started looking and researching, and very beginning of my computer time, well, my computer thing started in 93-ish or something. And then the internet was really, really slow. And I had AOL. And if for those of you who don't remember, you would sign on, it would make that noise. And then you'd have to watch an ad load one line at a time, the picture of this ad that would come on the screen. And then finally, once the ad had loaded and they see that you saw it, then you could go to your email or you could go to your browser or whatever. It was unbelievably bad. But I was online and I heard about, and this was in 2004, I heard about a charity gig that Mick had done in Santa Barbara with some of the guys from the band. There was Jeff Jacobs, who had been in the band for a while. There was Jeff Pilson on bass from Dokken. And and Jason Bonham on drums, along with Tom Gimbel, who had been in the band a while as well, and Mick. And so Jason had been in a movie called Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg. And so they worked together in that movie, and Jason was one of the people who came to Mick and said, Mick, you have to do something. You can't just not play these songs anymore. The world has to keep hearing these songs, kind of. And Mick had been, reconnected with his family and kind of, figure out things in his life. And it had just been dormant and he didn't know what he was going to do. So that kind of encouragement from different people helped him make the decision to start looking for a voice for the band. So I knew Jeff Pilson. I had been to a couple of his parties in the 80s, and we weren't close or anything, but we knew each other. And but I also a friend of a friend knew Tom Gimbel. So I set up this meet with Tom Gimbel, and we got together and I gave him some music that I'd been on. And most of it in the lead vocal form was kind of hard rock or metal stuff. And that's all I had at the time. So he took the stuff, and come to find out later that it was Foreigner was trying to, gear up again. And it takes a while for a machine of that size to fire up again, get all the gears greased and get moving. And Mick was looking for a voice. And I found out he was looking all over the world for a voice. And, but I started to have this back and forth conversation with management. So what they ended up doing was they sent me 5 Foreigner tracks, 5 hits of the band, the original recordings, but without any vocals. So someone had taken the 24 tracks from the original band tapes, maybe they'd been converted to digital, and they kind of just brought up the tracks on a mix and sent them to me to put my voice on, which was fascinating for me as a producer because I got to hear things on that tape that I never heard in the much played for decades radio releases. You just heard things different because they wasn't the same mix. I could hear this guitar doing something or the keyboards doing something that I hadn't heard before. So that was fascinating. But I spent the next 3 days diligently recording and putting my voice on there and really trying to make it just really fit that stuff. And I wasn't trying to go, hey, look at me, I can sing it different. Because whenever I went to concerts, I always loved hearing the melody the way I learned to love the song. And a quality song has a quality melody and quality lyrics and is popular for a reason. So it's not my job to prove how different I am. It's my job to serve the song. So that's what I did. And Mick Jones got to hear that CD in New York. And they were coming out to LA to do some rehearsal for I don't know what. Maybe they were going to listen to other people. That's the only thing I could assume. So I talked to management and I said, can I be the first person that jams with the guys? So there's a little lesson right there. Be the first one in, because as soon as they find who they like, they stop looking. And if you're a 5th person in, they're never even going to know you. So, but that was my little get in there early, because if they like me, So I went in and I had all these lyric sheets with me, and I was very serious, and my hair was much shorter at the time because I decided to be taken really seriously. And we jammed for about an hour and a half. And unbeknownst to me, the sound mixer was recording the rehearsal. And during the breaks, Mick was going in the hallway and listening to the mixes so he could hear them very, very clearly, So I left, and I remember distinctly getting home at 6 p.m. and later found out that in that time, they were having a roundtable discussion amongst everyone in the band and with common friends. Like Ricky Phillips, who plays with Styx, was a guy I had known and worked with a bunch of times during that producing engineering segment of my career. And he really gave me a good review, so that was really nice. So they wanted to find out if I was weird or I was an idiot or what. And so I remember distinctly, I got a call 1 hour after I got home. And they said, we have shows. We're booking shows for this weekend. Can you start rehearsing tomorrow? And that's how I got in the band. I had 5 days to learn the show.
That's an incredible story. And then we're going to go how you did 170 shows that year in a minute. But
well, we only did 75 shows that first year, but we started in March.
And you only had 5 days to warm up. Usually you take months to warm up for a tour, right? You're rehearsing and...
yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy because everyone thinks they know a song in the shower until you have to sing every first word of every single line of that song. All of a sudden it's like, oh, that's real now. I don't know the song. And so I had, I printed out lyrics. They were in my car. They were in my bed. They were on my couch. They were in my hand. And 24/7, I was just memorizing the songs. And it took several shows, quite a while, because I'd be on stage and all of a sudden I'd have a blank, like, what the fuck? What's the next thing? Because I didn't want to use teleprompters or cheat sheets. I thought that was lame. So I said, I have to learn how to do this myself. And if I ever start using a teleprompter, that's it. I will not do that.
What would you do when you didn't know the words to a song up on stage? It's hard to fake it. When you're in the shower, you can fake it all you want.
Right. I remember once turning my head to the side of the stage, and one of the gals that works for management, her name is Mary Hart. I looked at her and I said, "What's the next line?" And she goes, "I don't know." So sometimes, Tom Gimbel was really good. Because I could look to my left and Tom would mouth the words to me, and I would go, oh, okay. And then I'd be back on track again. So, yeah, and then I'm getting my stage legs back after not performing on stage for practically 14 years, not being on the road for that long. And, reacquainting myself with that bag of tools that I mentioned earlier and learning how to work the show and make the show the ebb and flow that it needs to be a complete show. So that took a while, and it was a daunting time. And, the band was at a fairly low ebb popularity wise too. So we had to fight that along with having a new singer in the band.
I hope you're enjoying this video so far, but before we jump back in, I want to know if you've ever thought about what you need to do to reach the next level of success in your life. Over the last 25 years, I've been an advisor to more than 50 companies. I've invested nearly 100, including Google, Lyft, and Seagate. And I also co-founded a company that today is worth more than $15 billion. I've been incredibly blessed in my journey. And at this stage in my life, I want to give back. I want to share the lessons I've learned so you can reach incredible success way faster than I did. In my own journey, I've learned that having the right mentor is a massive advantage to achieving our goals. I'm hugely passionate about mentoring others, and I'm looking for a few hungry entrepreneurs who are excited to take action on their journey to incredible future success. So if that's you, I've got an opportunity. In the description of this video, there's a link where you can apply to work with me. All you need to do is answer a few simple questions, and if you're a good fit, my team will reach out so we can build a game plan together. All right, now let's get back to the video.
I want to go back to something really important that you said, and I do a lot of coaching, a lot of mentoring, but I have a saying, do it now. And you mentioned being the first to do something. You can miss something by a millisecond. In my own personal life, I like to tell the story that I'd met my wife 3.5 years before going on our first date, and she was the most amazing, beautiful on the outside, more importantly, beautiful on the inside. And she loves sports and football and is laid back, just a very cool person and a great human being. And I learned on a vacation that she had made a Facebook post. I'm going on vacation with my boyfriend. And I said, oh, is this the engagement trip? And she wrote back to me, hardly. And she was going to Hawaii. I'd been to the resort about 10 times. I said, oh, this is going to be a great trip for you. And the Facebook post was the first communication we had in a couple of years. Maybe actually the first that we had period after the night that I had met her with a friend 3 years before. And I texted her, I said, I said, how's the trip going when she got there? And she said, we broke up. So I thought, all right, this is great. I said, can I take you to dinner? She said, I'm still living with my boyfriend. There's no way. I got a lot to do. She said, maybe when my my sister's getting married in California, and in mid California, maybe we can get together then. And I hate maybes. I don't believe in maybes. And so when she got back, I said to her, I'm coming out for this art fair called Freeze Art Fair this weekend. Can we go to dinner? I made it happen. And I was the only one who knew that they had broken up. And I remember being at dinner the night before with a famous movie director. It was a group of 8 people, a very interesting crowd. And he said, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, I'm flying to New York. What are you there for, work? I said, no, I'm going to take a girl out to dinner. And he said, you're a desperate guy if you're going to New York and you can't get a date here. And I went out and we got engaged 3 months later. We've been together now a little over 9 years to have 2 beautiful kids. But I tell the story often because you can miss it by a millisecond. Had someone learned about that she was broken up, she would have gone on a date with somebody else, I'm sure, immediately, and it would have been over. There would have been no shot there. But in business, it's the same way. We chase deals on a regular basis. Sometimes it is the first person there who gets the deal. Talk to us about the importance of being proactive and the importance of being reactive. Here you were, you're sitting there, you're producing, you're working with different musicians and bands and doing background vocals. But at some point you said, hey, I want to be a lead singer. You could have sat back and dreamed about it and done nothing. And so many people are sitting there today thinking, I want to do something else. I need to do something else, and are just not doing it. What's your advice to them in terms of proactivity versus reactivity?
Well, there's a lot of facets to this. Because I was frustrated where I was, and that made me unhappy. And eventually I said, this has to change. I can't continue to be this way. And when I realized that I wasn't getting called for gigs that I just accepted over the course of my life, just fell in my lap, I said exactly what you said. I have to start being proactive. That's where I said, I don't say no. I don't turn anything down. I'm just going to go out there and I'm just going to gather, and I know that it's going to move me forward. And I guess somehow I had just absorbed some of the philosophy that worked for me, like as far as like looking at a situation that's in front of me with the call about they're coming to rehearsal, and I just went to myself, oh shit, they're going to hear somebody else. And I said, well, if I get there first, they can't. Finding the solution. There's always a solution if you look for it. And then once you're in there and you're doing it, let's say I got the gig. Well, then I said to myself, well, I need to make myself indispensable every day. That's what I said to myself. And in between those two things, right before when they called me and said, can you start rehearsing tomorrow? I had to have another discussion with myself. I said, okay, not everyone's going to like this decision, and you're going to have to handle criticism. Can you do that? And I said, yeah, I can do that. And then the second question was, do you have the ability to do this? And I think it's really important to have faith in yourself to say, I believe in myself enough that I can jump off this cliff and take this risk. It's very, very scary, but oddly enough, everything I've done in my life that's been really scary, and I did it, were the most successful things in my life. My stepson is going to college. And he was reviewing colleges, and I was talking to my wife, and I said, tell him to go to the college that scares him the most. Because I think it's worth it, because if it's not scary, then you're too comfortable in it, and you're not going to be on guard to do your best. You're going to be floating because it's not so hard. I think that's the only way as a shark in any business that is you keep moving forward, and whatever you have to do to keep moving forward is what you need to do. That's most of the times the solution to your problem is to don't get stuck and stand there and not make a decision. I was listening to Jordan Peterson, and he said, If you don't know what you need to do something. Start walking down a path, and maybe halfway down the road to that path, you might decide this is wrong for you. So, okay, so you at least now you've moved forward. You know that's not the path. Maybe I need to shift over here and move this way. You've progressed. But if you don't do something, you don't progress.
Is fear our greatest motivator to success?
I'm not sure if it's fear. I think challenge might be a word I would use, because challenge questions whether you have the ability to do it. And then that translates to faith in yourself that you can.
Let's go back to something everyone wants to know about: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Is it really the case that you're a rock star and you're coming off of a stage, and if you're a male singer and a famous singer, there are lines of women waiting for you, and you can essentially have lots of sexual experiences and have a large selection of people willing to be romantic with you that evening, and it's just endless every single night on tour. I hear stories about this. I know a couple of musicians who tell me the craziest stories about this. Is that what it was like for you? And what about the drugs and all the other things that go along with it, including the fame?
Obviously, today is not the same as when I was 24. And then it's a matter of degree of what's your popularity level, because that's going to directly translate to people who want to be around you. And I want to relate a story that's not necessarily, but partly connected to what you said on the avenue of popularity. I learned a really huge lesson when I was in Hurricane. We were starting to do well, selling out clubs, doing little stuff on the road here and there, and people starting to know who we were. And then eventually we could get into any club. We didn't have to pay the cover fee. They would just we would bypass the line. They all knew who we were. We were like one of the hot bands out. And that was pretty cool, like, hey, we're rocking it. We're rock stars. We're getting it done. And, 6 months after the label went under, no one knew who I was or cared who I was. And I learned a valuable lesson about that. I learned a lesson about that this business and what it projects to you in your eye, in front of your eyes, is not reality. You have to know who you are as a person and value yourself and do things artistically for yourself, because everything out there is a facade. And people like you because they only know a fraction of anything about you. I used to get criticized sometimes because I'd be at an after show party and I would talk to somebody, and then after 10 seconds, my manager would tap me on the shoulder and say, you have to go talk to this person. And the person I was talking to for 10 seconds has now determined that they know me and I'm a dick because I only spent 10 seconds with them. And so all of those things related to fame and related to being a star is all external and it's not real. And I think it's really important. I learned that lesson. Going through that kind of humiliation, because I would go somewhere and all of a sudden no one knew who the hell I was. It was kind of a humiliation lesson. And it showed me, okay, you have to understand what's real and what's not real. This whole rock star thing, don't ever get into your head that you're great and it's all, and all that stuff is true, because it's temporary perception based on your popularity. So that's how it kind of connects to what I said. But going back to your question, when I was 24 and when we were pretty popular, I had my share of things happen, and I can't say whether it was good or bad, but it was my existence I hopped around a fair amount and did those things. And but then I think you get to a point where, like, I was in Hurricane and one night after the show, everyone was like rushing to get their clothes changed and fix their hair because they were going to meet chicks. And I was just like, oh, I just want to have a sandwich and a Diet Coke. And it just was over for me in that way, in a large part. And the drugs I never did, because I never did cocaine ever, because I was worried about messing up my voice. And in a way, having that excuse gave me an excuse to not indulge in those things that maybe I would have if I did something else. So I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful that I wanted to maintain my vocal quality at instead of doing something at the expense of that, just to have fun or a good time so I never did the drug thing, and I never was a super late hour out all night type of guy. I mean, it did happen. But it also happened that I stayed up all night in the studio at times too, working. So it was there. I saw it there, and I saw it with other people a lot. I saw all kinds of ridiculous things. The first tour that we did, we opened for Rick Derringer, and we had a groupie backstage. And I remember signing her underwear on the crotch while she was wearing them. That's just how it was, you know? And you know, all those stories, there's a lot of real in those stories, because it was a wild time. And yep, there it was.
So I think so many of us, this is true for me, have rock star fantasies. I've always had it. I love rock. I'm from Detroit. Rush is a Canadian band, as you know, but one of my two favorite bands. Love Bob Seger. And I play the drums. I bought myself a kit when I was 35 years old. I had drumsticks in college. I destroyed my desk where I was pounding so hard the wood splinters were flying off the desk. But I'm a very good drummer. I've got the beat, and we have a real estate company. We own a bunch of townhomes in Nashville. And as you know, it's just one honky tonk after the next in one venue.
Right.
And there's an amazing band at Kid Rock. Don't know if you've been to Nashville or not, but it's the first big venue there. There's 3 floors, and there's this one band that's incredible and super crowded every night. And the band's playing at the top level, and there's 2 levels. So I get to live out my rock star fantasy because I tip the band $100 and they let me play a song. And the first time you hit that boom, it's mic'd up. It's a whole different thing than playing in your bedroom.
Sure. And
it's fun. So for me, the adrenaline's rushing. And I said, God, this is amazing. This is as close as I'm ever going to get. And it's super fun. I look forward to visiting there. What's it like singing in front of 50,000 people?
There are a lot of different types of audiences. And this is my perception of it. You have a small amphitheater or a club. You have a casino. You have state fairs. You have sheds. You have stadiums, and you have festivals, right? That's the ascent. So basically, the ascending order of size, and you have to treat each different kind of audience differently. At least I do. I have to see them and read them in a different way. Plus, there's also the added element of what they call IMAG. IMAG is if you go to a concert and you see two screens on both sides of the stage, and there's live cameras on you, and that camera is showing, different camera angles of different musicians during the show. That's an added element of the show. When we do festivals in Europe and there's 50,000 people out there, it's great, but there is responsibility about the performance in my mind. I'm responsible for converting this audience to loving what we're doing. And so that's foremost in my mind. And then I have to, all of a sudden, you have to play a lot bigger than you are. It's like if you confront a grizzly bear, you have to make yourself as big as possible. Well, it's the same thing you do at a festival show. You have to be really, really big. If there's big IMAG, you can do more with your face because the IMAG's going to project that expression to the audience when your normal face on the stage from half a mile away is not going to even be seen. So you have to think about that I make that part of my puzzle when I'm going on a stage. And if you go to a casino, that's a completely different kind of audience because people are there, they're gambling, they come from all different parts to come in one place, sometimes from all over the world. So it's a very diverse crowd. They're not the normal, like Detroit's a real rock crowd, and they know how to rock out at a show. But people that are coming to casino are coming from everywhere, where sometimes they don't really like to stand up too much, or they're older, or whatever it is. So you have to handle them a completely different way. It's a more intimate way that you have to handle them, a personal, intimate way. And so I'm always thinking about I'm thinking about blocking. Where am I supposed to be on stage for this light cue? And so I don't bump into, Jeff Pilson on bass. And so I'm thinking about all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking about, do I need to readdress how I'm handling this? Is the crowd moving in the direction that I want them to at the time I want them to? Are they responding the way I want them to? And all those things are on a minute-to-minute basis of readjustment for me and how I do the show. I'm always trying to sing the songs the best that I can sing them, pretty much always the same every time, because they're set. That's set. But my body is not always set the same way. Sometimes my voice is a little bit more tired, or I'm maybe on a high altitude, or so I'm constantly trying to keep my vocal in the same place, like this, my hands. And even though the variables around me constantly change for me physically, so there's a lot going on in my head at the show. I'm not just. There are moments where I could just stand there in joy and just go, "Wow, this is awesome." But most of the time, I'm busy doing a job, and entertaining, hopefully.
In some years, you've done 170 shows. That's every other night, and there's not a lot of breaks in between. How do you keep up the stamina and the energy night after night? Because every night is a different night. There's different groups, like you said, and they don't care what you did the next night or the previous night. They care about this night. How do you keep it up? And do you ever say to yourself with the band members, God, we really fucked that up tonight. That was terrible. And do you ever say that was one of the best shows we've ever had?
Well, that's up to personal perception. I might think the show was crap, but someone else might go, wow, I've really had a great time tonight. So it's not always the same collective voice on how a show went. But as far as keeping up, it gets harder and harder every year to sing this catalog of songs because it's a very difficult rock catalog to sing. One of the most difficult commercial rock catalogs that there is. And so we have pared down the touring, and the number of shows in a row we're usually trying to do ones and twos, one show, day off, two shows, day off, that kind of thing. There's once in a while there's a three, but we have to make sure I have days on or off before and after that little run. And but basically for me personally, what I have to do is I have to give up a little something every year to maintain the status quo of my vocal quality. And but I also have to. It's like my voice and me are two different beings, and this voice is a diva and I'm not. So, but I have to pay attention to what the diva voice needs. So that means I have to make those show hours have to be the apex of my day every day. But to do that, I have to think 24 hours a day when I'm on the road for 6 or 7 weeks at a time. I don't go to work at 9 and come home at 5, and I don't have to worry about anything in between. I have to do it 24 hours a day, every day for all those weeks that go out. I can't smoke and tell stories late into the night at some bar over cognac, and I can't yell. I can't laugh too much. I like to say there's only so much tread on the tires. And so I'm very conscious about trying to make that show time to be the apex of the day, because I feel a responsibility, and I know that people are spending their time and their money to come see a show, and I want them to see the best foreigner show they possibly can. So I take that very, very seriously, and that's also part of being indispensable every day.
Band's been around 45 years. You've been in it around 19 years now. You've done thousands of shows, and you're now on your farewell tour.
Right.
You've reprioritized your life at some point. What's your advice to people who want to keep going and say, I just don't want this to end, and I'm going to keep going till it doesn't work, versus going out while things are great and while you're on top before you do start slipping in performance or whatever you're measuring yourself by?
Well, there's different types of people. There are types of people who, for whatever reason, will die on stage. They'll play till they die on stage. And there are many reasons, varied spectrum of reasons for the motivation that causes that. And then there's people who are like, more like me, who like, I don't want to be one of those bands that we all know about. We can name them. We can whisper them into each other's ear about the bands that are out there that shouldn't be out there anymore. And they're faking it, and they're on tape, and they're terrible, and everyone knows it. But they'll lie. Sometimes the audience will lie to themselves, go, oh, I love these guys for so long. I just had such amazing time. It's like, yeah, but did they suck? It's like, well, they weren't really like they used to be. And that's them being kind. That's not the truth. The truth is the band sucked. And I don't like going to see a band like that, and certainly don't want to be in a band like that. I don't want to be singing like that. That's a horrible blow to my vocal vanity, I have to say. And I also found out early on when I was in Hurricane that you can have passions for other things besides music. I accidentally found other passions besides music, and I'm quite certain that a lot of musicians never, ever found other passions. So they're stuck with their one passion. And getting older than them is now a hindrance to that, because the music business doesn't usually reward older musicians or vocalists with extended talent or extended opportunity. So I feel I'm ready now to start a new chapter in my life. I got married 3 years ago for the first time at 59, and I want to spend time with my wife and my family. I love to cook. I love to motorcycle and work on things and work on the house. And I want to be able to do those things while I can still do them, and not have to wait until I'm so old that I've spent most of my life serving this business instead of serving my life, you know? So that's where the decision comes in for me.
Ticket prices are out of control. Fans today go to concerts to hear the favorite performers. And when bands have had as many hit songs as you have, everyone wants to hear the hits. They want to make sure you play every single hit. And when you don't, people get disappointed. What is going through a band's mind when they're playing the hits and they play what I call a bunch of bathroom songs? You must look out at the audience, and you're playing a song no one really cares for or likes. You've got thousands of people streaming for the bathroom. What's the thought process there between playing everything the crowd wants to hear and while they're paying lots of money to go see you, versus these other songs that frankly no one else cares about but you may care about?
Well, fortunately, this band has had 16 top 30s, and
amazing.
Every single song we know charted and did well. And there's a lot of bands that can't say that. They have two songs that people know, right, and they've got to drudge through the set until they get to the two songs that people know. I mean, from the very first song to the very last song, we can't even play all the hits that people know. We do two ballads, right, in the show, and we had a third ballad, I Don't Want to Live Without You, that was like a number 4. We can't put another ballad in the show. So
right.
It's just, we're very, I'm very fortunate as a singer to be in a band where everybody knows every song. I mean, Jukebox Hero didn't chart that high, but it's become an explosive, quintessential rock anthem that more popular now than it was when it came out. So like, thank you. And that's really amazing. And I think the reason that this band has been around so long is because of the catalog. These songs are so great, and they were just omnipresent. They were ubiquitous when they came out, and they have been for decades. They're part of people's lives and knowledge and history. I hear stories daily about meeting, marrying, deaths, breakups, and all associated with Foreigner songs. So no one could be more lucky than me to sing a catalog of songs like this.
One of the things that I've been teaching for years and been one of the hallmarks of my success is something I called extreme preparation. And what I'm talking about here is preparing more than anyone else has prepared for anything that we're doing. So if someone spends 1 hour, I may spend 5. If someone spends 10, I may spend 80 on a corporate presentation that's important to our company. Can you give examples of how extreme preparation has been critical to your success? And is there a difference? Would you have been successful if you had not practiced extreme preparation versus others that did not?
There's a truth in the fact that your 100% might be somebody else's 70%. And I had a problem with that working with people because I thought that they weren't putting in their 100%. And I finally learned that if I looked over to this guy, his 100% is not my 100%, but it's his 100%. And so you have to be compassionate when you're that driven, because no one's going to live up to your expectation and your dedication to being prepared to do what you do. Second thing is, when you over prepare, it's like muscle memory. So that when you go to do the actual thing that you prepared for, you can forget all the stuff that you prepared for, and it will be in you. It's especially important in music. Like when you go into the studio, I can't think about technique and how to curl that note and be thinking about that. I want to be thinking about what the words mean, and are they touching me and motivating, moving me? I want the other stuff to be second nature. So that's where being over prepared really helps you, because you can then forget it. Because a lot of times people don't, and they're preparing in the moment when they're doing it, and that's definitely not what you want to do.
One of the things people don't think about when they prepare for a speech, for example, and they're so focused on memorizing and so focused, the one important thing they forget to do, I'm sure there's many, but one of them is to smile. They look unhappy because they're so focused on the words themselves, they can't focus, like you said, on the intangibles. Smiling, walking to certain points on the stage, body language, all those things.
A lot of bands in the 70s and in the 80s, like I was, it was considered the proper thing to do to be this rebellious, unhappy young man kind of thing. So you were encouraged to look stern and give that cool rock look that's not smiling. And me being in a band now, after the band has been around 45 years, we're not trying to prove how dark and cool we are anymore. We're trying to enjoy ourselves and make the audience enjoy themselves. And so smiling is a huge part of that. It's an automatic relayer to the receiver that there is happiness in the room being directed towards them. And it's communication without a single word, which is important for me because I might be singing different words. But if I can smile, I'm communicating simultaneously in a separate language. You know what I mean? And the fact that I'm constantly behind a microphone and in front of people, it brings an ease where you feel comfortable talking to people. I always look at in wonder and amazement, not amazement, but just wonder, like, because I'll know someone who doesn't publicly speak. And I can only imagine how difficult that must be to get up in front of people and be at ease. And I've become so at ease that although I have a skeleton of what I'm saying or doing, I have a lot of leeway to just ad lib. And some ad libs are are already pre-formulated ideas that maybe I've done part of or a piece of or done it differently, but I can still take that ad lib and still shape it like clay and fit that audience for that moment. And I think if you practice doing whatever you do, volunteering anywhere where you can be in front of a microphone, if you're announcing some name or someone's going to a stage, or, if someone's coming in the room for dinner, if you can get in front of a microphone in front of people, you will gain more ease that'll help you tremendously. So all of those things together make a effortless performance.
You've been in the music business now coming up on 5 decades, maybe a little over 5 decades since you were in high school. Things have changed quite a bit. Used to make money selling the albums. Then there were CDs. There are no more CDs. Today, the touring bands make most of the money on T-shirts and concessions. There's all kinds of carve-outs. Royalties have come down. And then you got Taylor Swift, the craziness, and the monopoly by Live Nation and Ticketmaster. What in your mind is the current state of the music business, and where is it going?
I wish I wasn't as cynical as I am, especially with AI now. I was sitting in a restaurant next to a very famous rapper, and I didn't know who he was, but we started up a conversation. We were right next to each other at the sushi bar. And then we started, I bought him a sake, and, we started talking, and I was very curious about what's current artists are doing. And I said, where do your revenue streams come from? And he said, live. I'm like, what? I'm like, that's where the only place we make money. He goes, I use social media to direct to live. And we use, years of people knowing the music and continuing to put on a great show to drive people to live. Live is the only place you're making any money. If you have a giant catalog of hits, I would have suggested you sold it 10 years ago. Because I can't see a scenario where your catalog is going to make more. It's not going to have a growth life to it unless something happens. But what I see now is everybody's stealing everything and no one's paying anybody anything. And if I can steal Frank Sinatra's voice in AI to make a TikTok clip that gets me 100,000 followers or likes or listens, and it makes me ad money, what the hell? What's going on? What does Frank Sinatra's estate say about that? I've done so many interviews and sung so many songs, I could be AI'd tomorrow and no one would need me anymore. So I feel that I'm making a wise choice. I have a cynical view of what's going forward for the music business. I read a story and I verified it with a playlist that there is a certain music platform out there that's creating songs by computer.
Yep.
And the same song is by 40 different bands and 40 different arrangements, 40 different titles, and it's the same song. And because they know that if you have 15 songs an hour in a playlist, they have to pay out their minuscule royalties to 15 songwriting entities. But if a third of that or 20% of that is computer created content, they don't have to pay anybody anything. So now they have a 20 or 30% saving on the royalties they have to pay out when they're already making billions of dollars on subscriptions and the artist is getting absolutely nothing anymore. So how can I have a positive view of that?
You have all these hits. You've sold 80 million albums. You have 5 platinum albums, and you're not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because critics view you as corporate. I guess that's the word out there. How do you feel about that? And is it ever going to happen? And does it matter to you?
First, it doesn't matter to me. It's kind of like a little clique. And if you know the people that do the voting and they like you, you're in. And if they don't like you for some reason, you're not. And but I do want to say that one of their qualifications for being allowed into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is something about the scope of your influence. And let me just say this. How many times has a person been inspired to pick up a guitar and play Hot Blooded or Jukebox Hero because they love the song, it's really popular? To me, that's the definition of influence.
One of the things that's most important to me in my life, and I know you've done a lot of work on this as well, is giving back to others and philanthropy. Can you tell us about the work you've done with the Grammy Foundation and some of the amazing letters you've received from parents and public schools about some of the amazing things that you've done?
Right. We started working with the Grammy Museum, Grammy Foundation, maybe more than 10 years ago. And for years, we've had choirs come on stage and sing on stage with us during I Want to Know What Love Is. And it's been to raise awareness about the lack of funding for school music programs. And like I said, I was a product of the school system. And the first thing that gets cut when there's not enough money in the budget is the arts, which is to me just criminal. Because that is the doorway to the outside world, outside of your small town, outside of your state, outside of your timeline, and you get a different perspective on everything when you have exposure to everything. And if you limit that part, because math and science and history maybe somewhat, but it doesn't change too much in your small town. Math doesn't change. It's not extremely exotic, but music and the arts can be. So we really enjoyed, especially Jeff and I have been, product of the American school system, giving back a little bit. We donate to their choirs, so they have a little bit of money. And during the summer tour here, we're going to be having multiple choirs open the show before Loverboy. And they're going to be vote on a winner, and the winner's going to win a Bose L1 system, PA system from our partners, Bose. And but we'll be on stage, and I look at the faces of these kids, and this is probably the first time they've ever been in front of that many people. And there's a little piece of the song where I encourage everybody to turn on their cell phones and their lighters. So the whole audience has their lighters and cell phones come up. And I just know that that's just got to blow their minds. So I'm really happy to see that. It brings us, I think, more joy than it does to them. And like you said, we've gotten really great letters from choir directors and parents and saying, this has encouraged their student in this direction or that direction, and really had an effect on them, had a change in them. And that's really great to hear, because that's the point. That's what we wanted to accomplish. And we also do a lot of work with the Shriners for the Shriners hospitals. And that's really a little bit of a give back too, helping those kids where parents don't have to pay for anything if their child is sick.
Stepdad, Henry Ross, who passed away around 9 years ago, was involved with the Shriners for around 40 years. It's a great organization, and I encourage everyone to go look online and see what they do. Before we finish today, Kelly, I want to go ahead and ask you some more open-ended questions. I call this part of my podcast, Fill in the Blank to Excellence. Are you ready to play?
I'm ready.
When I started my career, I wish I had known
more. Is that the kind of answer you want?
No, that's too broad. Specificity.
When I started my career, I wish I would have known more about collaboration. I tended to be all my eggs in one basket type of guy. But over the course of my career, I've had so many opportunities to work with and write with and record with other people, and I didn't take as much advantage of that as I should have.
Biggest lesson I've learned in my life is
you are insignificant.
My number one professional goal is
to leave a positive legacy.
My biggest regret is,
wow, I don't have many. Maybe not learning to cook sooner.
You make your own tortillas.
I did just last night.
Chicken enchilada, one of your best dishes.
Last night was tacos, but yeah, I do make the enchiladas too. Yeah.
If you could go back in time, what's the one piece of advice you would give to your 21-year-old self?
I would say, don't forget to enjoy what you're doing. 10 years are going to pass and you're still going to be 10 years older. So don't be so hard on yourself.
If you could meet one person in the world, who would it be?
Aretha Franklin. And I was right outside her dressing room door, and didn't get the chance to meet her. But you know what? I really think I would have only wanted to meet her if she knew who I was, because otherwise it's just a fan.
That's an interesting answer. I would have never thought of that perspective before. What do you think she would have said if you told her, I'm the lead singer of Foreigner, and there's no doubt she would know 10 of your songs?
She'd probably know the songs, and she would probably be thinking of Lou Gramm, not me. But you know, the one thing that I've always wanted is to just have respect from my peers, because anyone can be a listener, but someone who likes what you do and they know well enough the difference between good and bad, that means something to me.
Who's your favorite musician in the world today? Who's alive?
Wow, I have a problem with the word favorites. I'm not a favorites type of person, because that causes you to judge one thing superior to another thing when in fact they can be equal but different. So that's too broad of a question for me to answer.
For all the struggling musicians out there who are listening or watching this podcast, who know how difficult it is, they're playing in the dive bars, they're dying for their first gig, they're making $50 a night, or they're getting free drinks. What's your advice to them?
I wish you the very, very best. And I hope that somewhere, sometime, there will be an avenue that rewards you as you deserve to be rewarded for your ability. And it doesn't get stolen from you or overlooked or missed completely.
One question that you wish I asked you but didn't is,
what are you going to do after Foreigner?
What are you going to do after Foreigner?
Well, that's not fair. I'm doing your job now.
Now I'm the guest and you're the host. Hey, thanks for having me on your show, Kelly.
Sure. I haven't 100% decided. My wife and I are looking at that on a daily basis. I don't know how much public music is in my future. It could be, or it might not be. I haven't decided yet. There's still a long way to go, because this farewell tour will go into 2024, and everybody's trying to get me to go longer. But I have a fantasy vision of living in semi-rural France and simplifying my life, having less noise in my world. I'm not someone who seeks attention or needs the spotlight. I think I'm growing to learn what's important to me. And so I hope that it turns out to be something like that. And you know, just be with my wife. That'd be cool.
Kelly, I'm grateful for you to be on my show. I've been a huge fan of Foreigner forever, since I was a little kid. I know all the words to all the songs. It's on my playlist.
Since your hair was as dark as it was in your logo picture.
My hair, well, the logo has streaks of white in it, but I've never dyed my hair, so I don't know what was happening that day. That photo has not been touched up, but
right.
There are photos in my office here of when I did have dark hair, and at one point I had a little bit of mullet when I was in college.
Nice.
I want to be a rapper back then.
Right.
And thought I was cool, and I was very much not cool.
Right.
But I'm excited for you. Congratulations on all your success. I want everyone to go out and catch your farewell tour. I'm hoping to catch it as well. I know you're playing in Seattle or outside of Spokane, and in September. So I'm going to try to make that show, and if not, I'm going to catch another show.
Great.
So thanks for being here. Appreciate you. Thanks for sharing your story with us.
Thank you.